I remember with social media watching a sort of reality slash talent quest, which lots of countries had, and it was called Australian Idol. And I remember watching the judges say things to the contestants. So these judges are in their 30s and 40s often, and the contestants are generally late teen kids. And they might make comments about them being fat or ugly or stuff like that. And I was watching my kids watch these shows. I mean, I wasn't trying to protect them from it. What they didn't understand is that that's completely unacceptable in the culture that I grew up in. Completely unacceptable to do that. And yet it gets ratings. And so it became it became done almost instantly. And that's cultural change in the face of incentives. I don't want to say those people are bad and I'm good. It's just out with the old, in with the new, and we've all got to cope.
Okay, Nicholas, now we come to social media, and the next few videos, I suppose, put a context for social media and where it went right and where it went wrong. The first thing that struck me when watching it is that how soon we forget. So we seem to be, I always sometimes fall into the trap of thinking it was ever thus. Social media was
Yeah.
always like this.
Yeah. It's
And
always
yet,
fit. Yeah.
when you mention 2010 and that era of Twitter, and I started on Twitter then. I also started a parody account then. It was a great fun place to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would get criticism, abuse, but it was within what you would expect of the internet. And it's interesting, around 2010, 2011, and I wonder whether we can talk about this. That was when we saw the full power of social media with things like the Arab Spring and
Mm.
also uh, Joseph Kony 2012.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, the positivity of the London Olympics. But did that
So
scare
that's so the
the
London
powers
Olympics.
that be?
The London Olympics of 2012, I think.
That's
Is that
right,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, did that, the power of it, because that was like, it felt like that was its zenith of
Yeah.
munificence as a public good. Did that scare the powers that be? And then we saw social media begin its sort of decline into what is now, particularly something like Twitter,
Yeah.
a cesspit.
So, I mean, yes, I think that there are obvious. I guess it's true that there would obviously, if you're having as much power as social media did in the age of the Arab Spring, it stands to reason that those who the power sources of power that are threatened by that are going to have a bit of a think, and they're going to try and organise themselves. But I think the much more salient issue for us is that most of the bad stuff happened bottom up, just like the good stuff.
Yeah.
And now it isn't the case that we are, well, I guess one of the big themes of this series is, are we angels or devils? And my answer is it depends on the environment that we find ourselves in. And we thought, and so we looked at this amazing thing, social media, where essentially you just get onto the internet and you are in principle connected to anybody else on the internet. And we thought, wow, how about that? We like this idea. It's got a democratic feel to it. It's got a market efficiency feel to it. If you can do something a bit better than someone else, well, you get their position. And so that all sounded great. And then it turned out that if you are trying to get attention and you start focusing on how you get attention, you learn that outraging people is a pretty good way to do it, and and shouting at them, all these kinds of things work. They work to get attention, and that's kind of all you need. So my dominant explanation is a very simple kind of Darwinian model of culture. So we, yeah, I remember thinking, I can't claim that at the time I said, oh, you'll be sorry, this will all come back to bite you, you shouldn't be so optimistic. But I do remember thinking, yeah, look, take it easy. I remember when I read Joe Trippy's book, and Joe Trippy is a bit of a friend of mine, and that's his actual voice recording his words from the book, which is a somewhat painful thing for me to have asked him to have done, because I'm saying, Joe, that wasn't right, was it? And I don't think I thought at the time, oh, well, you'll be sorry, that's all completely wrong. I just thought, look, let's wait and see. There's maybe more to this than we realise. And likewise with the Arab Spring, there is a sort of a popular romance about revolutions. The French have got it worse than English-speaking people, and maybe the Irish have got it a bit worse too, because your revolution is throwing off foreign oppression. But most revolutions are disasters. Again,
Yeah.
something that the Irish know about, something that the French know about, and yet everyone's looking at the Arab Spring. And I wasn't thinking about this with some deep historical knowledge. I was just thinking, okay, so you're in a shitty situation. You're going to smash everything up. Why are you so confident it's going to be better? And sure enough, I think some of the places that went through the Arab Spring are a bit better. Some are worse. And it wasn't such an incredible renaissance. And I don't think we should be surprised about that. Doing good things is hard, and it requires us to do good things ourselves, and it requires some kind of aggregation of good acts, and they need to be reinforced by institutional imperatives. And
And doing good things is boring and slow.
that's exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And it's building. And it's
Yeah,
building.
social media doesn't
That's
have
right.
patience for boring and slow.
That's right. That's right. And if you want to build a good school, you can have a book or a blueprint that you follow and all the theory, and it could be great theory, but I'd suggest you try for about 20 years before you really think you've got a good school on your hands.
Yeah. Just going back to the essence of social media. So we're talking about it's the freedom. It's in theory very democratic, so it should be a marketplace of ideas. You have lots of private individuals in what is ostensibly a public space, or that's how we saw it,
Yep.
with our opinions and pooling our knowledge. And maybe we thought that the sum total of our thoughts
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
aggregate up to,
Yeah.
like, roughly speaking, when you drew lines through the fuzzy data,
Yeah.
it would aggregate up to good ideas
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes.
movements. But
Yes.
what did we miss then? Why did, because it still works. Like, you still have social media campaigns that can persuade,
Yeah.
but it's working less and less well now, and obviously it's being gamed. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
let's say, for argument's sake, the original algorithm was agnostic, and then we discovered, as you mentioned, Darwinism and all that, or Darwinian theory, that we look for the poison berries, rage comes more easily.
Yeah.
We watch fights. We like to watch fights rather than kumbaya, everybody
Yeah.
agreeing with each other. And
Yeah.
then, let's say, for argument's sake, that's what we're like. And then they discover, the social media companies look at this, the algorithm is tweaked to emphasize that, game the rage.
Right. That's right.
But apart from that, what did we miss in terms of the basics of social media, that there's an inherent flaw in it as a template for true participative bottom-up democracy?
So I think there are lots of things, but let's go back to the original metaphor that I presented in this series, which is a tennis game. Now, right now, as we're speaking, the French Open is on, and when you watch Djokovic playing Alcaraz, you see two people competing. You don't now. It's obvious that they're competing according to rules, and it's obvious that there's an umpire there. But you sort of have to concentrate to notice that, and
Yeah.
so you think, "Gee, these people are just so like, can you believe this level of skill?" And all of that is framed in a social context, not in an individual context. And so we look at social media and we forget all that. And we forget, in a nice, I think, a nice little expression, knowledge is a property of the network, not of our individual minds. And our whole way of thinking is that we think. I mean, this is the way we talk about AI, which we might get onto in another, in this discussion or another one. That's as if the AI is this thing, this little thinking or simulated thinking thing, but in fact, it's networked. It's using the network. And likewise, Google was the breakthrough search engine because it used the properties of the network. Amazingly, nobody thought about that for 4 or 5 years. And then it was a simple piece of mathematics to say that we can create a recursive index of the importance of a website by looking at all the links between websites and asking simultaneously which ones are most important judged by those links. And that, of course, is a recursive process. You go on and on doing that, and you come up with this way of assessing quality. And that can be gamed too, and immediately people started trying to game that. Immediately Google starts asking itself, how do we stop people gaming it, or is it kind of good that they're gaming it to some extent, and so on. So we miss all these things, and we we miss this layer in which we are related to each other. We relate to each other. What you and I are relating to each other, but we're relating to each other in a culture which tells us how to insult each other, how to be kind to each other, all when to do those things, and that's all largely invisible, but incredibly important.
And say in that culture, what's preventing us from roaring at each other or screaming at each other is maybe some basic rules that we adhere to unknowingly.
Well, and we know each other, and you and I
Yeah.
see each other. I'd come over to Kilconomics, the Economics and Comedy Festival that is held on the first weekend of November every year for anyone who wants to come and join us. And so we know we're going to meet each other again. That helps. So that gets rid of the road rage problem. I mean, I think of social media as a road rage. I don't know whether you've had this experience, Colin, but I've driven somewhere and I've been enraged at some other driver who's been what I think is inconsiderate to me. I've beeped them or do something, or maybe I don't, but I think I might. And then I gradually realised that as we keep taking the same turns, that he's my next door neighbour, and I'm full of shame. I'm full of shame. I mean, why couldn't I be generous to him? Why couldn't I have thought, oh, well, he made a mistake, or maybe I'm wrong, or whatever? But that's not what we do in road rage.
And that connection, all we're looking for is our own humanity to be acknowledged. So if you think of the most egregious thing another driver has done, if they simply
that's right,
give a wave of acknowledgement,
exactly. Sorry about
it dissipates. It dissipates.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a normal person, it will dissipate hugely.
So another, can I add one other thing, which I think is a really important thing? It's not a big theme of the video, which is that one of the things that social media presented us with, and I had a kind of an advance exposure to this in the area of blogging, which sort of took off in the early 2000s, and social media took a while later to take off. And so I was writing participating in a group blog, and there would be tremendously nasty fights on the comments threads. And one of the things that's happening is that the public and the private, well-defined realms are getting mixed up. We're sitting in our bedroom and we sort of feel it feels private, but we're actually in public. I remember with social media watching a sort of reality / talent quest, which lots of countries had, and it was called Australian Idol. I don't know whether it's called Irish Idol, but it was, or Britain's Got Talent or whatever. And I remember watching the judges say things to the contestants. So these judges are in their 30s and 40s often, and the contestants are generally late teen kids. And they might make comments about them being fat or ugly or stuff like that. And I was watching my kids watch these shows. I mean, I wasn't trying to protect them from it. What they didn't understand is that that's completely unacceptable in the culture that I grew up in. Completely unacceptable to do that. And yet it gets ratings. And so it became done almost instantly. And that's cultural change in the face of incentives. I don't want to say those people are bad and I'm good. It's just out with the old, in with the new, and we've all got to cope.
So just getting, before we wrap up on this video, just to kind of sum up again. So social media, people, freedom of expression, private individuals talking in a public space. There were rules. Is it just the case that that moderation of what we say, not censorship, but just because over time, for example, Twitter, all the shackles have been taken off, and people can say what they want now. It's almost impossible, really, to be reported for saying something, and the reporting happens publicly if there is any. But what is it that what do we learn from of its decline, and is there an example of how self-regulation works. Like, is
Yep.
self-regulation, does it need thousands of regulators,
Mm.
each exercising a relatively restrained bit of not censorship, but correction, fact checking, such that it isn't being policed by czars and
Yeah, yeah,
over
yeah.
over enthusiastic people?
Yeah.
What's the model?
So, firstly, I'd say that so we have this realm in which anyone can participate, and then we connect it up. And what I'm arguing is that those connections and how they work, both physically, but here in this context, culturally, that's really what matters. And what we know about Twitter and Facebook is that what made more money was what got built into that culture. And so that's showing us that, at least in that context, profit making isn't very consistent with human flourishing. We have another example, which we'll probably go on to talk about more in the next video and the one after, which is that Wikipedia is the same story. Wikipedia is a network of any person they like can turn up and start working on Wikipedia, using Wikipedia and contributing to Wikipedia, just like Twitter. Its governance, it's trying to do something completely different. Its governance is completely different, and it's not a it's instructive that that governance is not for profit governance, and so that's an interesting thing to take into to take into future discussions. The other thing I'll just say quickly is that one of the things that you would think needs to happen on social media is that people should be allowed to say anything outrageous they like, and then they should be just ignored. And that's what would happen. If you're in a pub and this is happening, then firstly, people might sort of physically throw you out. But if you rule that out, people just move away and just ignore that. They lose their patience with it. And there's a collective loss of patience with it. Now, that takes a lot more discipline when you've got thousands of people and some of them know, oh, that's that person. But other spectators of this particular conversation won't have seen them before, and they'll want to give them a ticking off. And pretty quickly, these people will find their way to the top of the attention stack again. And so that's another way in which it breaks down. Everyone can collectively agree that the most outrageous behaviour shouldn't be rewarded with attention, but in such a free and open environment, that's hard. And when you've got people trying to make money doing the exact opposite of that and amplifying it, you're sunk.
Okay, so motive is a key thing. So a couple of things. One, we're going to argue anyway. That's natural.
Yep.
Two,
And it's good. And it's good.
people, let's assume people can say what they want, and there is a mechanism for condemnation, if not censorship.
Yep.
But that will still, with even without the algorithm, that obviously, sorry, without the algorithm's a facile thing to say because there has to be some sort of rule for
Yeah,
what
yeah,
things
yeah,
are
that's
promoted.
right.
But even without the gamifying of negativity, that stuff would rise to the top. But at the very least, if you strip out the I make money, the angrier it gets motive,
Yep.
you get something closer to what we used to have in social media.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's right. I think that's
So
right. The other thing that's interesting about Wikipedia is that Wikipedia has an objective. The objective is to produce an encyclopedia, and so people who are, and it's not so hard to work out whether this is a good contribution to an encyclopedia or a bad contribution to an encyclopedia. And so that gives you a way that gives you a very powerful principle of governance, and that was all missing in that's all missing in social media.
the other crucial thing, I suppose, is that something like Wikipedia, which we'll explore in the next video, its currency is facts.
Yeah,
It's not
that's right.
opinion. Whereas social
That's right.
media, there are facts there, but it is hugely what
That's
people
right.
think about
That's
the
right.
thing that just happened, and we'll
And,
never get away from that.
and we want disagreement. That's
Yeah.
part of that's that. And but we've got to work out how to do it. And we had a few thousand years of evolution before social media turned up, giving us some pretty good rules about that and some pretty good culture about that. And then here we were, and it was a free for all, and there were no guidelines, no guardrails. It made my experience in the early 2000s on blogging tame. But the same thing, we'd all gone through it a bit, and again, in blogging, you didn't have any people trying to make money out of attention in the comments. So, so we kind of ran into a perfect storm in many ways.
Okay, so next video is if social media sucks, how come Wikipedia works? Looking forward
Yeah,
to hearing how Wikipedia works.
it's going to
We'll
solve
chat
all our
next time.
problems. Okay,
Yes.
thanks, Colin.